We'll call to order at 6:03, call it. Hinesburg School Board meeting for budget discussion. I'm sure Jim will be here. I did get a message from Tina that she's running a little late, so she'll be here. I'm sure Dave will be here as well, but we have our board members here, so we might as well start and get into business. Any adjustments to the agenda? Hearing none, moving on to audience and communications. I see we have a small audience, and I expect a couple more, from the PI meeting. I was promised that some folks from PI would come in when they're done with their meeting. But then I think we can jump right into discussion matters into our 4.1 budget work session. 4.1.1, association input regarding contemplated reductions. There's no one here from the association. I'm not sure we have any reductions that need to be addressed anyway, so that's probably why there's no one here. So that covers 4.1.1. 4.1.2, budget overview of proposed budget FY16. Who's going to start? Me, you?
Change sheet's coming around.
All right.
I don't have any additional material tonight for you other than what you already have, but if you didn't bring your change sheet and you want one, Jeff has graciously offered those up, and I do have a revised announced tuition sheet. I think it's revised, or it's because I didn't include one in the packet.
You did.
Yes, it's revised. Based on me including in the original packet an earlier version from Mike. But we can get to that when we do the announced tuition approval. So at this point in time, it'd be good to take a look at the change sheet, and if you're comfortable with what's on the change sheet, let Jeff Allegra and I know that, and if you aren't, have an appropriate conversation to let us know what you are comfortable with.
I have two questions. One might be a refresher. On the change sheet, about 6 lines down, there is an admin .3 FTE decrease. Can you refresh my memory as to what that is?
So, I'm trying to think of if it was last year. I think the change was made last year, but it wasn't affected on the budget last year, so that's why it's in the budget here. Is Laura went from, I'm sorry, not to use it, special ed administrator went from .89 or 88 down to a .5, and she remained in the regular ed budget at the .39 level. Allegra and I have figured out a way to compensate that loss, so we've decided not to put that back into the budget.
Okay. All right, thank you.
That was effective this current fiscal year.
Right. So this year, we've been doing the duties that she
And
had that were
we're
regular ed.
adjusting
We've
for next
taken
year's
them off.
budget.
So
Correct.
we feel like we can.
Trying to remember when the change happened.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. And, the other question I have is a few lines down from that. At least on mine, it's highlighted, the one that says capital improvements and the coding question.
Yes, that's between Jeff Allegra, Mike, and I. Before we finish the budget, we need to know what line exactly to take it out of, and they're gonna tell us that before we revise the budget.
But basically, the 20 grand has to do with building improvements or something.
Yes.
The 5-year capital improvement plan.
All right.
And just so we could explain it if someone asked, can I ask them?
Yep, please.
The two pieces, and I think they're related, the CSSU services assessments and then the special ed revenue, those sets of lines. So the middle.
The CSSU services assessments are just about every line in your CSSU budget lines in the Hinesburg budget changed as a result of both decisions the CSSU board made between baseline and their finish, and then ADM changes, because all costs out of most costs out of CSSU are allocated by ADM, and the baseline had in last year's ADM. We have now gotten this year's ADM,
right.
so we updated. Yeah. So that's why some of the items changed $47 or $500, and then the rest of them are tied to, as I say, the decision packets, the
Yeah.
the,
Compare
or
as
changes
sample.
that the board approved at the CSSU level.
Okay. In the special ed revenue, that's just changed.
Oh, the special ed revenue is, we carried in last year's revenue up until this version. The state publishes
Yeah.
their assessment of what revenue will be realized from this year's service plan, and they publish that the last week of December.
Okay,
we've
so it's just
updated based
catching
on
up. Yeah, okay, great, thank
that.
you.
Yep, good questions.
And there's so little changes on the decision packets that I can bring it to your attention now. And the slides that I had prepared today were slides that you had seen before with an additional slide that kind of showed the expenses and the cost savings. That was the only additional one. But the only piece that's different that you would notice here on this sheet is that there was a reduction in expenses that would be a cost savings for us in one of the slides on the decision packet presentation last time for $25,000 for a paraeducator. If I can bring you back to our discussion at the end of the meeting about if we have a large kindergarten class come in and how can we best prepare for that. We had thought that if we left that para position in, that it would provide us an opportunity if we had to go and find X number of dollars after the budget has already been approved. That might be one place that would make sense for us to keep into the budget. So we've taken that out of the reduction in expenses. Is that
Or it could be used as a para position.
correct?
Depending,
To augment.
to augment for
Classroom.
tier 2 intervention.
Correct.
So you could use it for a para position, use it for a classroom teacher,
Help
or
out.
not use it at all.
Correct. And as I think our track record shows is that we're not gonna fill a position just because we have it.
And one reason it wasn't filled this year is looking at the numbers of the kindergarten class, but also, you know, we're meeting all the time about their assessments and do they need extra help, how are things going, and just the makeup of this class, there was not a need for that. So next year's class could be very different and could have needs such that we do need to put that position in to help with tier 2 intervention or to help with the kindergarten. So I think it's fiscally responsible to have that in there.
But besides actual numbers based on projected numbers, the actual numbers are here. So,
Right.
I mean, we've tightened those up, but everything else would be the same as you had remembered it last
So,
time.
just so I personally am clear,
Yep.
the $25,000 that was showed as a reduction in the slides from last time, it would show up in here as a $25,000 decrease, but you're not putting it in here.
Correct. So we
Okay,
took it out of the
Yeah.
change sheet.
okay,
I get what you're
so
saying.
it's not,
Because
okay,
it's always been in the baseline,
all right,
so we just took it out.
okay. And so the total budget figure here and the results of the calculations that Bob did are leaving that $25,000 in.
Correct.
Okay,
So admin considered it and decided against it.
okay, thank you. I guess I should just highlight for the record, the top two lines on the health insurance change to 4.5% increase and dental insurance to 0%. That is consistent with material I received over the holidays from VHI to confirm that the anticipated rise in health insurance premium is 4.5% instead of 10 that we had preliminarily done.
Yep.
And dental is 0, and I can't remember what we had done preliminarily, but regardless, it's 2,142 less than that.
Great.
We had thought, at our last meeting on December 8th, we had thought that was gonna happen, but now we know for sure that it is. You ready to talk about this sheet? Any other questions? I'm sorry. Any other questions on the budget change worksheet that just got circulated? All right, hearing none, then, Mr. Mason, hypothetically, if we did anything with the fund balance tonight, would any of those changes affect this sheet?
Yes, if you added 100,000 to fund balance application, it would take your offsetting revenues, line 10, about font size 6,
Yep.
from 1,308,000 to 1,408,000.
Okay. And then
It will
therefore
have a
there would be.
measurable impact on your cost per pupil and your tax rate.
That's what I thought. Not that we need them right now, but might you have those figures for later?
Yes,
Okay.
I did, if I can find the copy of
Okay.
the email I sent you. The addition of $100,000 in fund balance will lower the tax rate from an expected 1.553, line 32, to 1.1404. And so the percentage moves from a 1% increase in tax rate to a 0.3% decrease in tax rate. If I've done all my math correctly.
I don't have the email in front of me, and what's that do to the budget? The 2.262 goes to,
Doesn't change the budget, just changes the revenue.
Yeah.
right. Right. Thank you.
So we'll discuss that at some point, right, the fund balance?
Yes, and I'm just looking to see if we should do that now. If no one has an objection, let's start talking about that now.
Or maybe go through the decision packets to see where we are with that?
I guess we could sort of, I mean, this is still a discussion point. We are gonna be asked to take action on the FY16 budget tonight. So, yeah, if you wanna take a sort of sense of the room of where we are on approving of the decision packets, I'm happy to do that.
Would you like me to run through them really quick?
Yeah, I
mean,
think
just
that
as
would
a-
be helpful.
Okay.
I guess I would also remind the room that the temperature of the room at our last meeting was in favor of these decision packets. And I guess the only change then is that $25,000
Change it.
para position, which I think I sort of just heard people understood and accepting of.
So the new classroom teacher would be allocated to the 7/8, with the understanding that we're anticipating a class size of about 56 for kindergarten, knowing that that could fluctuate where it could force our hand into having to add another teacher at post-budget, but this would be a 7/8 teacher. We talked about an increase in .2 in art, and that would be for our primary students, just exposing them to more of the arts program, and it's more in line with what our neighboring schools do.
Can you remind me what our current level of art FTE is?
Only 1 day per week for all
40
students
minutes.
K through 8.
I mean the
Oh, sorry.
FTE.
1.0.
1.0, and this would change it to 1.2.
Correct.
Okay.
We currently have 2 teachers. One is a .8
Yeah.
and one is a .2, which would make this move possible
Okay.
without having 3 teachers per se to do this. An increase of .05 in world language program that would allow our 7th and 8th grade student population to be exposed to world language 5 days a week, and for such a minimal increase, I think that would be most beneficial. Increased salary of our behavior interventionists. We found this to be an extremely helpful model, keeping all students in classrooms, which is really important. And this would be on par with our other behavior interventions for a grand total of $34.26. This is where the capital improvement 20,000 would go to. It would go toward the 69 wing, the roof repair, and the infamous lawn care service blunder that I fell all over myself about. Hopefully, there's no more questions. But that's a $30,000 net cost. addition of supplies seemed like that was well received last time, and that's definitely very much needed here in this building. Yeah.
Can you, you probably told us this and I'm forgetting, the 69 wing, which, this is part of the 69 wing, the K2 is part of the 69 wing, over the cafeteria is 69 wing. What was the what portion of the building was the 69 wing roof repair?
That I'm not sure of, Tim. There's 3 sections of roof that need to be repaired in the 5-year capital improvement.
Yeah.
In the way I initially thought there was $50,000 in the capital improvement, and then I just the section that cost $20,000. That's the one that I took out because that's
Yeah.
what's missing in the capital improvement.
Yeah.
But there's actually 3 sections of roof for a grand total of $55,000 that needs to be. So I'm not sure which exact section.
Because we did do some of that when we did the K2 wing,
Mhm.
and I think we left some of it undone.
Do you have a history of that?
The easiest way to answer the question is for Tim to provide you the map, the roof map that shows the areas that were done and the areas he's proposing.
We're gonna get asked about it.
So we can generate that map, but generally, the whole roof on the wing was done, and probably a third of this section was done.
Yeah, remember we left a portion not
Right.
done.
So that's what it'd show, and that's where he's carving out the next chunk to do.
And when I get back to my seat, I can look at the other 2 sections of roof to see. But Tim and I went through and we talked about this idea of a need and a want. And you know, I'm very thankful to have Tim who is very good about keeping the building where it needs to be so that we don't face a huge unexpected cost. He does the best job that he can to anticipate. So I'll go back to see what the other 2 sections are in addition to that.
All right, thank you.
So 15, on your change sheet, you'll notice that this $15,000 is broken out into furniture and supplies. So Bob Allegra and I sat down and figured out how much we needed in terms of furniture and how much we needed in actual classroom supplies. So that's detailed out a little bit more on your change sheet. And the reduction in expenses, this is where you would have seen the para position. That's no longer there. And that we were assuming 25,000 for that, I believe. And the other change that I made is I just combined health and dental after seeing the change sheet with the 36.
No.
So any questions on that? And then these would be your decision packet. Decisions that need to be made, and here are they're not really savings, just reduction in expenses.
I'm having a sidebar conversation, I shouldn't do that. So,
What did you see the rest of the board?
Keith,
Yep.
I have a request to get a copy of this, and within that copy, if we could get added information so that we see, like if there's a change in FTEs, for example, adding the 7-8 teacher, we're going from 5, whatever it is, 5.0, 6.0 FTEs to 7.0 FTEs for that grade level. So whatever the change is, if we could get the before and after, as well as whatever the increase is, we will be asked that.
Yep, so in the packet that I passed out yesterday, I have more copies here, it kind of gives a little bit more detail on the decision packets. So I don't know if this would suffice, but the statement of the objective was addition of 1 classroom teacher, description of activity at current level of operation. It says currently we have 4 7-8 teachers, resulting in some classes of 31.
Yeah.
But if you want it more detailed than that, I can.
Yeah, you know, in this format, if there were column, you could add a column or two so that we have an understanding of change from something to something else. Because just adding .2 FTE art, I'm just saying, for example, if you're not in the building on a regular basis and you don't have a good sense of what's going on, I mean, the information that I rely on, because I am not in the building on a regular basis, and I don't have a kid taking art classes, I don't know what the current level is.
So current level to,
And FTEs are helpful.
Yep. To requested level. Current level to requested
Yeah,
level.
it's sort, in general, just a before and after
Okay, yep.
snapshot.
I can do that for you. And is there, I can obviously share the PowerPoint with the board. It's gonna be on the website anyways, right? Yeah. Okay, so I'll do that before we leave.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, especially, I have to say, not having looked at this stuff in detail for, several years, I was kind of surprised at how low the FTE for art and music and all that stuff was.
Right,
So
right,
if I don't know, a lot of people in the community don't know.
right, right.
So,
Because when Jim was on the board, we were at 2.0
Yeah.
FTE for art, I believe. And
Great
so,
point.
That's right, yeah.
you know, we've had a lot of changes in the past few years in the other direction.
All right. Any other discussion, questions, comments about decision packet?
I just have one clarifying question. If that's a decision packet, is the health dental adjustment supposed to be on that? No.
That's not a
It's
decision
not like
packet.
it's, you're right, okay.
I'm just showing
Showing
kind of
where
what's
the-
going out,
okay.
what's coming in.
I was
Yeah.
just wondering if that was showing up in two different places in the budget.
We make sure it doesn't.
Yeah,
Sometimes administrators would like that to occur.
Yeah, the chart we're looking at actually says change worksheet, not
Right.
necessarily decision packet.
Good question.
So, good question though, thank you.
I have a comment.
Oh, please.
So just for the record, I will not be supporting the increase in .05 in the world language program. And that's based upon the amount of money the district has invested in data and data mining. And the data showed that we did need to increase a classroom teacher for 8th grade to help with outcomes in math. And have yet to be presented with any quantitative analysis looking at how that .05, whether it's needed, and I know it's only $3,300, but every dollar counts. So that's where I stand.
All right, thank you, Bill. Were we gonna spend a few minutes looking at this
We
chart?
can go through all of them, and you can approve them or give us a signal of what you want in any particular order, but when you approve them formally, they need to be kind of in the order on your agenda,
Okay,
so we make sure we.
well, I can
go through these if you want.
I had the question about how the how a potential fund balance change would affect the per pupil cost and any of the other numbers. I also have a question about the CLA. I did not receive anything in the mail, which I thought I did, about changes to the common level of appraisal for the town.
They intended to give you notice in the mail, and they're embarrassed that they did not get it, I
Okay,
guess. But I
So-
have multiple copies of the letter you got,
okay,
or should have gotten. So it's official.
okay.
Okay.
And can you share with us, not necessarily what the number is, but what the implication of that is?
You can have my official letter to the town. What the outcome was, the outcome is included in line 31,
92.04.
yes.
Bob, will you give me the elevator speech again about CLA?
CLA is,
And what affects the budget and what we pay and
since,
blah, 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 blah.
since you're all intertwined with every other district across the state of Vermont, all our money goes into a single pot called the Ed Fund, and then we get our money out. They now need to equalize assessment values across the state so that a town can't engage in strategery or tomfoolery and keep their assessments low so that their taxes are low. So they look at everybody's assessments, assessed values across the state, and then equalize them so they're all having the same impact on tax rates, and that's called the CLA. So CLA fixed at 92.04 says that your assessments are 92% of market value based on a complex technique they use to set CLAs. If your CLA goes down, it means that your assessed values are getting further and further away from your actual value of homes. So the CLA goes down, your tax rate goes up. Is that at the appropriate elevator levels? Or?
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Say that twice.
So we look at kind of the difference between the two each year. And if it goes down year to year by 3 percentage points, it's probably going to feel like a 3% increase in taxes. All other things being equal.
Tax rate, but not tax burden.
Yes.
Which is why we need to focus on budget numbers as well.
If this year's CLA was in place last year, the tax rate would have been $1.18. So there's a 4 cents.
This.
That's a good calculation to carry with us.
Yeah, because it just shows, I guess, I don't know, we're doing good things otherwise to help lower the rate because it would otherwise be higher if the CLA. I guess the CLA is hurting us by 4 cents.
Did you just calculate that, or how did you find that?
Mad math.
Mad math. But that's an interesting one to carry. Yeah. That's good. That's,
So it's hurting us.
that's good. And we haven't had, our properties haven't been assessed in probably 7 years or something. I mean, it's been a while.
I think this might be the 10th. I think '05 is when it was done.
Time
Yeah, there was
flies.
some,
That's longer than that,
there was
yeah.
some town discussion about when the next is coming up, I think.
I know mine was assessed.
I guess it's been more than 7 years.
It was before we had the drop in between. We had the up and then the down, so.
I'm just teasing because I built a new house. I've been assessed. Personally.
So when the town gets reassessed, does that go up close to 100, or does
Yeah.
it, can it go over 100, or does
Could be
100 is the
over,
max?
yeah.
We were
Statistics
over.
would say they go over a bit.
Right.
They're over assessed based on market dynamics looking backwards. So you'll see towns who were reassessed go up to like 103, 104,
okay.
and then come down over time.
Gotcha.
Is that because traditionally market value is 80% of actual retail market value, or?
Bob's guess. I am not an expert in property values. I am not an expert in assessments, but since we're reassessing in this year and then we're using property transactions for the prior 3 years, it's quite possible that the assessments are a little higher than what the market. So, but I'm not an expert in that arena. I know what it does to taxes at schools.
So while we're on this chart, then, I think historically, one of the things this board has focused on is the per pupil cost, both as our pupil count was going down years ago, and now in the past couple of years as it's going up. So, absent doing anything on the fund balance, it looks like our per pupil cost in line 26, correct?
Correct.
Is going from 15,059 to 14,646. So we do have a decrease, even if we
Yes.
didn't do anything.
Due in large part to your fiscal restraint on an operating budget and your, the fact that you have 20 additional kids in the building,
Okay.
counting equalized pupils.
Is it accurate to say that because the way we pool the money to Montpelier and distribute it back out to the schools and the CLA, that's really the only number we can really affect, correct?
Which number?
The line 26.
The per pupil
Yeah,
spending,
yeah.
essentially because of the
Right,
budget,
right.
the budget number.
That's
The The state would have you believe that, yes. That the key area to focus on is spending per pupil, since that's essentially how tax rates are calculated. There are some other numbers that go into the formula. There's a base amount that the state sets, which by law is supposed to ramp up with cost of living. And then there's a statewide tax rate that's based on the state's analysis of inflows and outflows and adjusting the statewide tax rate to make sure it all balances. The base amount feature of the tax law says that they'll, to a degree, hold you harmless if the only cost increase in your spending per pupil is cost of living. So that's kind of the way the formula works, Bill. So it's best to focus on that number, but understand a little other, the other two dynamics of how the tax rate's calculated.
I guess my point is we can't really affect the tax rate.
Right.
We can't really affect the amount of taxes that we actually pay because of the way that the education spending is pooled and to be distributed. What we can affect is the budget, and that line 26 really reflects what we've done with our budget.
And
Good.
getting below the 15 is
Right.
huge, I
Right.
think, for us.
Right.
That was, we were.
That's why this is, it can get confusing. If people say, oh, you cut your budget, but my taxes went up, and that's a really tough pill to swallow, in my opinion. But we can say, hey, we're really trying to do our best, and what it really is, we've cut the per pupil rate,
Yeah,
but the cost per pupil.
yeah, well, that's
Yep,
my focus.
excellent summary.
So, can we talk about the smallest number on the page, which is right above line 25, and the threshold? It's 17, I can't read it, 17 something. But
17103.
and we used to be very close to whatever the state designated threshold was, and if I'm looking at it correctly, we're at least $3,000 away from it. And just, getting affirmation from you that, yes, we're far from the
Your
threshold.
perspective is correct. You're in less and less risk relative to penalty threshold than you were 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, we can. Oh, 14, we were close.
Yep. Don't celebrate that one
Yeah,
for too long, because the state is, the legislature is actively engaged in trying to bring that gap down so that more and more schools are impacted by the penalty threshold, because legislatures in large numbers believe that's an effective way to limit you all in spending on pupils.
And Bob, while we're on this per pupil topic and on this page, again, not getting ahead of ourselves or myself on the fund balance, but if hypothetically we applied 100 grand, do
Yes.
you have what that per pupil number would be?
I didn't attach it to what I sent you.
I don't think so. I think it was just the tax implication.
I'll have to thumb through the file to find that little document that allowed me to write the letter to you.
Okay.
Can you explain, I guess, the importance of what you're asking? What the fund balance, what that has to do with the per pupil, for me?
If we have 100,000 extra in revenue, then we have to raise 100,000 less through taxes, essentially, through the statewide system.
Line 10 or 13 will go up by 100,000?
Yes, line 10 and 13. So then education spending goes down by 100.
Right.
And so then when you take the education spending per equalized pupil, you take line 14 and divide it by line 15.
At 100,000 less?
Yeah.
$100,000 in fund balance will lower your spending per pupil by $189.01.
Line 89, so,
What's that number?
sorry.
14,646 plus 189.
That's what I'm working on.
Mad math.
Who's quick at that?
Stacy.
What do you want to do now?
14,646 minus 189.
14,457, if my mad math is right.
14,457.
6+ big numbers.
Okay.
What did
Thank
you
you.
come up with?
14,457?
I have 14,456.
Because I use 646.
Mine's on a calculator.
I use
so
six.
mine-
I use
It's
646.
like from the web.
Minus 180.
We're within.
Yeah.
We're within pennies.
I rounded your
Yes.
94
It's a
cents up
rounding
to
error.
to $1.
All right. Okay, thank you. While we're here on the sheet, any other questions on this sheet? Again, for those of us that either can't remember or don't know, this is a state mandated sheet that we have to include in our budget materials, which is why we look at it.
Yes. I'd also emphasize for clarity that this is 2/3 of Hinesburg's school tax rate.
Yeah.
The other third comes from CVU's sheet, which is just finished Monday night.
And in terms of finished, they voted on what to send to the voters?
Yes.
Can you recall ballpark figures?
I don't wanna do that off the top of my head.
have
Let me
that
see what I can.
photographic memory.
Yes.
Think of-
Seven
Get
of
it
you, I
messed
get
up with another
confused at
school,
times.
We'll know soon enough, because one of the things I
Why I
wanted.
do have that here.
Yeah. There we go.
Thank you.
They finished with the impact on your local tax rate would be increasing the CVU tax by 4.63%. And it's both due to their spending as well as the percentage of children that are, of Hinesburg residents that are at the high school versus at the elementary school. So if you go through a year where your 9th to 12th grade is a greater count than the prior year, you go grab more of their tax rate.
Yep. All right,
Hey, Keith.
thanks. Yes,
I just
Stacy.
took the math the rest of the way down just to see what the impact was to the tax rate.
Yeah,
And it drops it from the 115 and change down to the 114, so it's like a .015 drop in the rate. Assuming the rest of these numbers are good.
so it's 114 and
Yeah.
114 even,
It was like 1.1400 something.
which is
Which is what.
contrast, which is what Bob said, contrasting that to the 1.1437 from
Yeah.
last year. All right, that makes sense. All right.
Yeah, it's a little bit lower than the prior year, but it's close.
Okay, so any other questions on this? And do we want to discuss fund balance then before we go to approve it in 5.2? All right. So I think the big question is to confirm that the numbers that Mr. Mason circulated the other day they're different than what we were told at the last meeting. So we just want to make sure that these numbers are
Yep.
correct.
You have $303,000 in the bank, ready to apply. And the three of us are estimating you'll end this year with a surplus. I would caution you don't spend surpluses where you have them. So I'd focus more on the 303, but be aware that this year's looking particularly good as well.
I don't think the board is inclined to go crazy spending this money, but I would point out historically, well, I'll look to those who've lived in town longer or served on the board longer, but I seem to recall an annual tradition of adding 100,000 from fund balance if we had it. We did that for a number of years, but then the last couple of years, we didn't have it.
But when we were doing it, it was, I think our fund balances were healthier than the 300. We were closer to like 400. I don't recall us bringing it, I should have gone back and looked, but we've usually tried to keep it 200, 250, and I think like last year or so, we really were bringing it way down. And given that this is an old building, you never know when you're gonna need the money. I don't know. I would turn to you, Bob, for advice, but I'm not comfortable going below 200 in our fund balance, and I'd be more content with 250.
Can I ask a question? maybe you said this and I didn't hear you. So we're at 303 as of today, available.
Correct.
And we are estimating you'll finish with an additional surplus of 221.
Correct.
So if everything else is rosy, we're gonna end up in July 1 with 500?
Correct.
Okay, 21, thank you.
Oh, I was reading this as ending with 3
No.
really quickly.
No, you have 3 as of July 1st last year. And you put money in or take it out at the end of each fiscal year. And if you finish with 221 to the good, you're gonna put that into fund balance as well.
There's a lot
And
of
I just
time left.
discounted you from aggressively spending $221,000 based on the first quarter forecast from the 3 of us on how the world will end and
Right.
or the Hinesburg school year will end.
So if we applied 100 with, if these numbers come true, we'll end up with 421 roughly.
Right.
But even if half of their prediction comes through, we're still at 300, which is, to me, seems comfortable based on our history, but maybe,
And
maybe I misunderstood.
And we discussed last time, with maybe a little bit less risk with the special ed moving to CSSU.
Right, we talked about that, that's right.
But it's
Yeah,
more
be
A little
be
bit
a little
less.
bit
A little bit
careful
less.
because, yes, to the extent when it's consolidated at CSSU, your bad news might be offset by somebody's good
Understood.
news. But CSSU assesses costs, so if special ed falls apart next year, everybody will feel the pain.
But my point is, you're at a lot less risk than one big whack in one incident versus
Correct,
a little more prolonged pain.
absolutely right.
And the other piece to consider is not taking too much, because then the next year, the money may not change, but the impression that goes to the community is that you've got these big swings that can work against us.
That's an excellent point. The advice I would give is that make sure you're able to both see enough money there to cover this year as well as 1 year out, so that if you need to, you can begin ramping down. But have 100 available and put it all in, then you're setting yourself up for $100,000 cost per student increase the following year in its accessory tax rate. So
Which
look
is what
look
happened.
both right. Look both
3 or 4 years
years.
ago.
Look at what you're doing for fiscal year 16, and can you do it in fiscal year 17, and then make your judgment.
The risk that we're facing, I mean, this looks very healthy, obviously. We have 300 going into this school year, and you think we're gonna, if things continue to go well, we'll have an extra 220.
Right.
I mean, that looks very good, but there's whatever the risk is between now and the end of June of this year, and then whatever the risk is for all of next year. So we're talking about
Correct.
the bad things that might happen over the next year and a half.
Exactly.
So, I mean, on the other hand, I do agree, we did, when things were good and we had the money, we did used to usually put $100,000 in, and I have to say that seems reasonable under these conditions, but I certainly wouldn't put more than that in, particularly because, and correct me if I missed this, but there's at least the possibility that we could wind up with a big kindergarten class, and it's just a possibility, but if we do, we'd want to use some of this year's surplus to sort of prepay as much as we could in terms of, supplies and things of that nature, isn't that?
Yes,
That's
that
right.
would be an appropriate technique to engage in.
But then if that comes up, that might also dip into this year's surplus, right?
That's a good
So I certainly wouldn't spend more than $100,000.
Yep.
If I may make one more comment, the other side of that, and I agree with what Colleen said, but the other side of that coin is, if you have too high of a fund balance, the community might be saying, well, they got 500 grand in the bank. Why do we need to pass this budget with a 2.8 or 9% increase? So we gotta be conscious of that too, you ask for this much, but you're not spending it, just ask for less. So we just gotta be, it's a kind of a little of a tightrope walk, but we gotta
Yeah, but
find that right
we're
balance.
not going to town meeting with 500 in the bank. We're going to the town meeting with 300 in the bank. Because we don't know.
Understood.
We've got 6 months of the fiscal year left before we really know where we are. So we've never, never, what does that mean? I don't remember when we presented the fund balance issues, I don't remember banking on what's gonna happen in the next few months. We just went, from the fiscal year that ended that prior June 30th.
I guess I agree, it seems a little aggressive to bank on something you don't know, but I feel comfortable in what they're telling us that they're gonna spend, and I think for me, I feel comfortable that at least half of it will come true. And if half of it comes true, we're still at 300, which is a number I can live with. So that's where I stand, but the only thing that has me a little bit nervous is facilities. And I know you're on that committee, so I don't know if you can speak to, are there any huge costs that we can expect in the next couple of years, especially in light of development or not development going on in town?
I used to be on the facilities committee, and that's been Kathy recently who's done
Kathy,
that.
sorry.
But we do have the white building. We're probably gonna get asked about that, but yeah.
And is there
Kathy.
anything that we are anticipating there that we should think
The white
about?
building we took care of, kind of quietly with that, some of the short-term bond we did. So there's not a big need actually over in the white building.
And it's true, we can't put on an addition, right?
So we're meeting on Friday to talk about the projections, and first blush would be that we don't need an addition for, given the projected increase in housing units, but we haven't had that meeting yet. It wouldn't, that's if we needed to go there, it's still quite a ways out.
It's a ways out, okay.
And it would certainly be bonded for.
Using fund balance for such a project, I don't think would be the
Right.
It wouldn't
appropriate
be,
thing to
okay,
do.
right.
It'd be more like, your mechanical heating system just kind of blew, and you don't want your kids to freeze for the rest of the winter. Would need to do something, and you could draw from the money for capital, but then you'd have to retroactively get voter approval for any spending,
Okay.
depending on timing of when things might happen. Right?
Yes, I would recommend that you all kind of footnote your work plan, and when you run a favorable yield in the current year, you can, before the year closes, transfer money to your construction fund for specific projects. And given your favorable performance and the conversation you just had, it would be good to task the three of us in the April-May timeframe to say, working with Tim, are there things, we should now move money over to cover in the construction fund?
Well, that's another consideration. Of number of times, I can think of at least a couple times, we transferred money from the fund balance to a capital fund.
Yes.
And voters approved it at the meeting. I think, like $50,000 or
I remember now. I
or
had forgotten
something
about
like
that, but yeah, that's quite right.
Maybe another one was like 140,000 or something, but like that. But we did it for a specific purpose for capital fund, and it was a transfer, but we needed the voter approval.
Right. Tim, Jeff, and Allegra and I don't have anything that we think you need to do that this March, but we would love the opportunity to re-engage the conversation in the May timeframe about whether to spend a little bit of money on that side of the ledger.
Well, at that point, you might have better numbers around kindergarten.
Yeah, and we'll have another 6 months in use of this
But you don't
seasoned
anticipate,
facility.
like, I hadn't thought about this until you just mentioned that, but you don't anticipate that now we might want to have a separate article to transfer some of the fund balance into a capital?
Correct.
fund?
We nothing rose to the occasion that we thought that was appropriate for you to consider
Okay.
this month for
Okay.
articles in March.
How about generally applying some amount of fund balance to our articles?
The capital.
Should we have an article to apply some portion of the fund balance to our budget?
Okay.
You do have an article to apply some amount of your fund balance to your budget. It's article
The last
last
several years.
5 or 6. The
The
last several years,
it's
it was
been-
worded such
Yes.
that you apply none to next
Yes.
year's budget
So-
and hold all you had, though small, for future years.
So my question is, should we change, do you have an administration recommendation for whether we should change that amount to say
An actual amount.
Yes.
applied.
Speaking on
50,000,
behalf of
100,000,
us collectively,
150,000, 200,000?
and individually, we think an amount of $100,000 applied as fund balance for the 15-16 year is an appropriate thing for the board to do.
Correct.
For Article 6.
Right.
And can we have the phrasing to offset? I guess this phrasing is from the state, right?
It's from your legal counsel, of which I'm not that person. And that's pretty much worded the same across all of our schools in the same year to year. And depending on whether you've got money to apply in that next year is whether you get that additional sentence. And generally, your voting electorate enthusiastically approves these articles because they understand it has a favorable impact on what they're going to pay in taxes. So.
Yeah. I don't think there's ever been a no vote on that.
I guess I'll chime in. It seems like everybody seems to be kind of leaning toward using the fund balance. My opinion is that the fund balance should really be used for a rainy day. And I don't really consider this to be that rainy of a day. I was a budget buddy last year. That was much worse last year. I don't know what the future years are gonna bring. It seems like there's some wind at our back with pupil increases, some changing in the education fund, the special education funding that's helping us this year. To me, you got a discount to 200 that maybe we'll be getting, so I'm looking at the 300. 300 as a percentage of the budget. I don't know if you look at the fund balance in terms of a dollar amount. I would look at it more in terms of a percentage. I mean, 300,000 on a $9 million budget versus 300,000 on a $6 million budget is completely different. Again, I don't know the whole history of the fund balance, but 300,000 on a $9 million budget does not seem that significant to me of a slush fund. So if it were me, and I also think that it's of value to try to smooth out the changes over time. You know, that's a philosophical discussion about whether that's appropriate or not based on what Bill said, that, hey, you should keep everyone as low as possible, you know. But my 2 cents is, to me, it's a rainy day fund, and to me, this is not that much of a rainy day.
Would you be comfortable with allocating 50,000?
Well, I mean, I don't have a vote in the matter, so, but.
Well, your opinion
My
counts.
opinion is I wouldn't use any of it, but that's
Yeah.
just my opinion.
Well, I mean, you do raise a good point, because when we were trying to keep the fund balance at about 200, 250, our budgets were a couple $1 million less. I mean, that's a good point.
I guess I have a question, and if it's not appropriate, just tell me so. Do we have I guess, the amount of, I mean, the biggest piece of our budget is salaries and benefits. So do we know about what percent we can expect that amount to go up next year? Because I believe that's already been decided. So I think we probably have a pretty good handle on what percent we can expect the budget to increase next year based on just that.
As it relates to professional staff, you're correct.
Because, I mean,
The
it's.
support staff is not under contract.
Right. But do we know what that percentage is, and is that public?
For the professional staff, we do. And you're right, there isn't a lot of risk with.
I guess that's my point.
With 70% of your budget, so there's not,
And if you're saying.
You're correct in your risk
And if you're saying
assessment.
you're seeing no huge capital items popping up, 70% of our budget, we pretty much know what it's gonna be next year. I'm just, quite frankly, not that nervous, and I agree with Bill to some degree that I think it's not fiscally responsible to leave a ton of money in the bank like that. And I like the idea of keeping the tax rate consistent from prior year. I think that says a lot about what we're doing here in minimizing our expenses. Although we have these other things out of our control, we're doing what we can to keep it the same, and I think that says a lot. That's my vote.
That's the way I look at our budget. It's actually such a huge portion of it you can't be surprised by. Because it's, we can't influence it much, nor can it surprise us by much. So I don't look at a $9 million budget and think we need a larger fund balance. I think that I look at that smaller portion that could fluctuate, but
Especially.
odds are we're gonna add a position next year probably somewhere based on student enrollment, and that to me seems like probably the most exciting thing that'll be in a decision packet, but I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but
And with even our risk on the benefit side is lessened with the single payer discussion for this year being gone. That could have, we didn't know how that could have affected the 70% out of our control, but now we, at least for another year, know where that stands. So it's another.
Do we have any information about what the other towns keep in their fund balance as a percentage of their total budget?
If you hadn't added the last, I could give that to you tonight. I know the amounts, I don't necessarily know the percentage to their budget off the top of my head, but the CBU and Shelburne have in the vicinity of $500,000. Charlotte was more similar to your journey. They had none to speak of up until this current year, and they now have enough to have this conversation, which they're thrilled with that. So who have I offended and left out?
Williston.
Williston has not put fund balance in their operating budget for probably 3 years because they too depleted everything they had.
so what balance are Charlotte and Williston basically carrying around 200?
Yes.
But they would like it, if you talk to board members, they want it higher.
Yeah.
Especially Williston, that's a
There is,
Board
there
members
is
are
no-
very uncomfortable
This
having
is
it
all
that
risk
long.
management, and it's all risks that you're assessing out 2 or 3 years. So you're not gonna get a clear, crisp answer that this one's right, that one's wrong. It's all how much comfort you have.
Yeah, their fact pattern could be completely different from ours, right?
The key would be to make sure that you're positioning the successor board of this one to have the conversation in January and have enough money to have the conversation. Because it gets noticeably different if you come into January and you as a board can't even begin the conversation as you were in the last 3 years. I would also tell you you're covering risks, not just locally as they occur. Last year you saw things happen across the state that caused a whole lot of pain and agony to taxpayers. It would have been nice to have some fund balance to kind of dampen that. So you know the dynamic is a little more broad than just mold occurring in the school or a roof blowing off.
I do think in answering voters who may question the question that Bill brings up, if we can index that other information and have that with us at the time, you know, someone says, why haven't you put the full, why are you carrying a $500,000 fund balance? If we look at Hinesburg and say we feel at 300,000, ours is right in the middle of what schools in our district carry, I think that's, because I don't think it's a question of as much of what we think is right as how do we explain to voters how we came upon that decision. Mm-hmm. And if we're somewhere in the middle, that's a pretty easy place to defend.
And it seems like we're probably going to end up somewhere in the middle
Right.
by the end of the.
But I
Fiscal year.
just want to emphasize, it's not $500,000 that we're talking about, it's 300.
Right.
So I think we're ready for a motion on this?
Well, I was gonna take last comments for purposes of 4.1.2, the discussion of the budget, proposed budget, before we move on to 5.0 action matters. Any last thoughts?
I just want to add that I am also struggling supporting world language for the same reasons Bill is. I actually was going to speak right before he did, and he got on first. So I also feel it's not a ton of money, but at the same time, I guess the question I was asking, and maybe there's not an answer to it, is what spot is it taking the place of? Like, what are the students not getting by getting this extra? Because I'm assuming their schedule's already full. So something has to give for this to come in. And I've just heard a lot of discussion around math. And to me, I'd rather see the students doing more math than world language, personally. And if we don't have data to support that our students need it, I guess I struggle with it too. And I don't mean to be difficult, it's just hard for me.
So I can answer what they would be missing. So since world language is 4 days a week and the schedule is regimented such that there's blocks of time for core instruction, that day, that 5th day of the week is this time to be creative for the team, where teachers are available for extra help, things like that, of that nature. They've done some team building things during that time, but they're using it as an extra period to do things with their students that otherwise they wouldn't have the opportunity to do, but it's not core instructional time at all. Having said that, if world language was 5 days a week, some of our students who need a little bit extra support that don't attend world language have that time opposite world language
Right.
for tier 2 instructional services or tier 3 instructional services.
Right.
So it'd give them an additional, not only would it give the 7/8 an additional world language time, it would also give the tier 2 and tier 3 students an additional day of smaller group instruction.
Okay. And you feel that extra, I guess that benefit far outweighs the benefit they get from having that open period time with the teachers and team building and all that stuff that you said that sounded great at the beginning?
Yeah, I wouldn't have proposed it if I'd done it.
Right.
It's just a recommendation. I mean,
And I believe historically, we
I appreciate
used to
that.
have it 5 days a week and it was cut back,
mhm.
not too long ago.
In a year where
Within-
times were tough?
Within about.
Yeah.
I think 4 years
maybe
ago,
about
6th grade had it
4 or
5
6
days a week.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So even if we did a comparison of, and looked at CV, a long-term kind of comparison, I don't know if we'd be able to do that because it wasn't too far
Right.
in the past that there was 5 times a week.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Yep, thank you, Stacy. All right, are we ready to move on to action matters? 5.0, action matters, the first one, excuse me, 5.1, adopt fiscal year 16 proposed budget. I guess I would entertain a motion.
Aye. Is that what you want me to say?
What?
Is that what I say? Aye?
Well,
I'm so
do you want,
moved.
do you want me to word it and then?
So moved.
I would entertain a motion to approve a fiscal year 16 budget in the amount of $9,008,185.
No, you don't.
No,
No,
I'm
no.
sorry. I'm sorry.
like, I don't see
I'm
that
sorry,
number.
now I'm looking at 9 million, in the amount of $9,056,786.
Is it 66 or 86?
86.
Oh, this is wrong.
This is, yeah. Only $20 for your own money, Keith.
This one.
Bob made a mistake.
Yeah, that's what I got.
Oh, yeah, but
Shocker.
this sheet says 766 at the top.
I did.
Or $10 off.
I off by $20.
Oh, no.
Bad boo-boo Bob.
Cancel all the numbers that were
Yeah,
just.
the tax rate just changed.
For $20, come on.
$20.
So it's
Oh,
9,056,786?
Yeah, that's your adjusted baseline here, shows.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Oh, right.
This is Mike's number.
We go with that
The one
one.
on the other sheet
We'll
is
go with that
Bob's
one.
number.
Well, as long as the first number is right.
You're looking at the official document.
Yes.
Okay, so I would entertain a motion then to approve a fiscal year 16 budget of 9,056,786.
You can say so moved.
So moved.
I'll second that for you.
All right, are we
And it doesn't mean it doesn't mean you necessarily approve it, it just means you get it.
having had discussion, are you ready to call the question? The motion on the floor is to approve a budget for FY16 in the amount of 9,056,786. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
The ayes have it.
Did you want to make a motion to
Yeah.
amend the budget? Because what you could do is have made a motion to amend the budget by amount, we vote on that, and then we vote on the final budget.
I was just gonna state for the record what my opposition was, if that was fine, or,
You see my strategy?
I do.
Because then, I mean, what we want to do is
It does make the record clearer, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you might want to sort of pull back the vote on the motion.
I need you. So,
Is that
Okay.
what the board would like me to do?
yes, because I think it
All right,
adds
we won't-
clarity to the
I am comfortable with whatever you
discussion.
decide, Keith.
Okay.
no, decide.
We will,
So we had a motion and a second, further discussion, and Bill might want to.
Bill might want to make a motion to amend the
Amend-
I would like to
budget
make
by-
an emotion to amend the budget for a decrease of $3,376 to reflect not adding a .05 FTE world language teacher.
And then.
Do
you
I have
want
a second to
on
that
amendment.
amendment motion?
Second?
Are you ready to vote on that question?
Well, we want
On the
discussion on
amendment?
the,
Do you want
It's
further
Robert's rules,
discussion
proposal.
on that amended number?
Again, for the record, the reason I am making that motion, amending, a motion to amend that is I do not support the .05 increase FTE world language. The rest of the budget I do support.
Any further discussion?
And if I could just clarify that when we vote on a budget, it's a recommended package, and we allow our administrators to implement the budget the way that they see fit, but a wise administrator takes the words of board members and tries to implement based on what we've somewhat agreed
Wise
on.
administrator.
So your suggestion about the world languages, I think having that clear in our minutes would be really helpful.
Thank you, Colleen.
That's-
Thank you. I think, no, that was very helpful. Any further comment or discussion on the amendment to the motion? Are you ready to vote on the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment to the motion to amend the amount of the fiscal year 16 budget to,
$9,053,410.
thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, any opposed, say no.
No.
The noes have it. So now we go back to the original motion. The original motion
Thank you
was
for
to
going through that exercise.
approve a FY16 budget in the amount of 9056786. Any final discussion before we vote on that?
No.
All right, are you ready for the question?
Yes.
All those in favor of the motion to approve FY16 budget in the amount of 9056786, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Congratulations. Thank you very much. We have a budget amount for next year. We still have a little bit more work to do, though. Action Matters 5.2, approve fund balance article. I would entertain a motion.
I would like to move that we apply $50,000 of our fund balance to offset revenue, to offset our taxes for next year, to be applied to revenue.
And just
Whatever it is.
for the record, hypothetically, I
Oh,
think this is
get
what
it in
the
the
article
article.
would say. Shall the voters of the Hinesburg School District authorize the Board of School Directors to apply $50,000 of the school district's current fund balance as revenue for the 2015-16 operating budget and apply the remaining balance as revenue for future budgets? Reading from the text of, I think, the last time we did such a
Yes.
thing.
You're good.
All right, any discussion?
It hasn't been seconded.
Oh, I'm sorry, I need a second. Sorry, thank you.
Second doesn't mean you approve it, it just allows us to move the vote forward.
Way to sell it.
We could approve the motion and have a discussion, and then hypothetically, someone could amend it to 100,000.
Seconded.
Thank you. Discussion. So, I would just like, I would prefer to approach the fund balance in a conservative manner. And to me, conservative is leaving in about $250,000. Just because we have a very old building and we have no idea what's going on in the state, but we do know that state education funding is going to be the hot topic this year, and we don't know how that's going to have an impact on us in the next couple of years. So that's my rationale for being conservative with a fund balance.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to amend. The motion to apply 75,000 of fund balance to this year's.
Do I have a second for that
I'll second that.
amendment? Thank you very much. Discussion of that amendment.
Just trying to compromise. It's hard to have a.
It's 25 grand, but I think that's prudent.
Nobody has a crystal ball, but.
Right, I think.
But do you guys think that it's unrealistic to expect half of what they're predicting to not get spent?
I think Colleen made a good point about school funding being a real hot topic, and I think that's.
For next year?
We've
this-
got-
this legislative
yeah, there's a
session.
$17 million budget gap
I think it's,
I just,
that they're facing, and they're targeting education funding.
and what Bob said about next year, it's really hard if next year we can't find 75 to
Right,
apply to fund
right,
balance. It's,
right.
we've been through that. It's
Yeah.
really hard.
right.
I don't-
So
I don't
it's
have-
more,
I'm sorry, go ahead. I was gonna say, I don't, obviously I don't have a vote, Dave doesn't either, but I think there's something to what Dave said before about this year being relatively favorable, certainly compared to the last several. But perhaps, and with regard to what might happen with our betters in Montpelier over the next few months, it's conceivable that that might turn the wind against us, to adopt your metaphor from before. So it's possible that next year, for reasons having nothing to do with what you guys decide to spend in the building, that still it might be a less favorable year for political reasons. So if you want to spend a little bit, put a little less in this year, and if things go well and you really do wind up with a 220 surplus, then you might be able to go over 100 next year and to help the tax bite. So I think there's something to that.
Yeah.
Do we know when Hinesburg is set to get reassessed on the property values? I know it came up in discussion, but I don't think anybody really, does anybody really know?
And it takes over a year to do it. They've got to put it out to bid and then get somebody, I mean, it's like a 2 or 3 year process. It's a multi-year process.
So it's not started yet.
Right, I don't think it's gonna
I
affect
would,
next year's.
I gotta believe at some
numbers.
point that will help us or hurt us, but.
Well, it's the tax rate, but it's not it won't affect the tax burden. The tax burden is not gonna change.
No, but
People
it
are-
affects the rate, right?
Yeah, it
So,
looks better.
the CLA,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. No, I get the burden piece, yeah.
I kind of would think, go along with what Dave was talking about and what Jim was just saying, I mean, I just remember years where we put 100,000 in and then we get to the point where we didn't have 100,000 put in it, and it really hurts. And it hurts, and it hurt several years in a row, so to go on the air of caution and would be my recommendation.
Thank you.
What amount would you be comfortable with?
I would probably go with the idea of 50,000 to nothing, and based on what talk out of Montpelier is right now, and you know, who knows what next year is going to bring and what it's going to look like. It's not looking good.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I agree, I was with a 50 to nothing. I mean, my inclination would be to nothing, but knowing that people want to do something, I would be comfortable with that. But, you know, in speaking with other board members in other towns, they would prefer to have a number that's a little more comfortable, because when it gets to a point where it's, below 200 or, 200 to 300, it's not a comfortable position for boards. And
And by doing the 50,000, we still don't have a huge jump in the overall rate. It's pretty, like you said, it's pretty nice, sort of flat. It's not painful like it was last year.
Well, I think too, I mean, looking at what you've done as a board to look at the cost per pupil from, 15,000, the school in general, 15,059 down to 14,646 is pretty big too. That's it.
And it's not like the money disappears. I mean, we're not spending the money. It's, you're putting it in one pocket and taking it out of one pocket and putting it in another. It's half of it's in your head.
Really, ultimately, the only people you're hurting are the people that leave town, because if you don't leave town, you're gonna get the future benefit of that fund balance. And if you leave town, then, who cares about them anyway, really, right?
Never thought about that.
I think you should put that in the minutes.
I think you have to look into the camera when you say it.
I'm a budget buddy, I can say those things.
So the motion on the floor is essentially to take 75,000 of fund balance and apply it to the budget. Any further comment, discussion?
It's the amendment to the
Yeah,
motion.
it's the amendment, so were we to call the question, what we're voting on is the amendment. Do you want to approve of amending the motion to change the 50 number to a 75 number? Are you ready for that question?
Yes.
All those in favor of the amendment to change 50 to 75, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Ooh, Keith.
I was waiting for
Stand
that.
up and face that.
I'm going to vote in favor, so by my count, we have a 3-2 in favor of the amendment. So now, returning to the original motion, having been amended, we have a motion to approve the application of $75,000 to the as revenue for next fiscal year's operating budget and apply the remaining balance as revenue for future budgets. Any further comment or discussion on that underlying motion? All those in favor of that motion as amended to 75,000, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. We have approved an article for fund balance to apply 75,000 to next year's budget as revenue. That was 5.2. 5.3 then. Now, having gone through those exercises, we're ready to adopt annual articles and warning, a form of which was circulated in preparation for this meeting.
Yes, and Sandy has kept pace with your conversation.
Wow.
Has revised the document. Jeff is going to pick it up off the printer.
Excellent.
But you can move forward
Shall
with
we,
your
shall we
consideration.
table
and
that,
vote.
move forward and,
Yeah, because all you're gonna do when he
We're
comes
just gonna
back
proofread
in
it.
at the end of the meeting is double check that it says what you think it says. And
Okay.
then you're gonna sign it.
so if people have in their hands the proposed articles that were circulated and can envision in their head that there will be a number plopped into Article 5, that number being 9056786, and that Article 6 will be revised to provide essentially that we will assign 75,000 of the current fund balance as revenue for next year and the rest for future years. I would be ready to entertain a motion to approve those articles.
So moved.
Is there a second? Thank you, Bill and Colleen. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you very much. 5.4, approve announced tuition.
Here's the revised announced tuition sheet with correct numbers on it. You're required by law to set and announce tuition and then apply that to anyone and everyone who comes in your door looking to pay to attend. The state is prescriptive in how that's done. You take your proposed budget, you get to remove some things that you cover those costs in other directions, and then divide the net cost by the number of pupils you expect in the building. So this sheet does that. It takes your total budget, removes exclusions, and then divides the net number of 6,618,000 amongst the 515 estimated pupils for 15-16 to get to an announced tuition for the next school year of $12,851, and we would ask you to approve that amount tonight.
So I would appreciate and entertain a motion to do so.
So move.
Thank you, Kathy. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Colleen. Any need for discussion on the announced tuition rate?
I understand at another board, this was a very lengthy discussion. Is there something that we're missing? No?
No, two things complicated that board's journey. One was they thought they could set a tuition that would allow them to collect more money from the school, the community that sends them most of their tuition kids by motion that night. They had to be dissuaded from that as a technique. And then the amount was in error because someone grabbed the wrong enrollment number from your new demographer's report.
Okay.
So anyway, you're lucky you're not that bored.
This has never been a hot topic for us before because it's pretty standard
It's
formula.
relatively straightforward. It's somewhat risk-free because we're obligated to spend countless hours in August of every year taking all your actual costs, rolling them back into the calculation, and then either charging people or returning money to all those we collected tuition from, or you collected tuition from. So it's
Can I
a
ask a
journey.
question? On the estimated number of pupils, how does that, I understand the equalized pupil is a different number, but
Correct.
I guess, the formula calls for the estimated number of pupils?
The formula calls for you to use the estimated number of pupils that you have on record as of this point in time. So we always take that from your forecasted enrollment for next year. And so that 515 should agree with the NESDEC data that you already have in your hands.
Can you remind me why the equalized pupil is different?
Equalized pupil is fabrication to get at an appropriate way to tax all of us based on cost per pupil. And it is believed that some children are likely more costly than others. So for example, there is an adjustment for secondary education of 0.25. The belief being, somebody 10 years ago, that it costs 25% more to put a kid through high school than it does grade school. There's 5 other adjustments that are made, and then it's equalized so that maybe beyond your want to understand. It's equalized so that if we started across the state and had 84,321 kids, after we adjust all their weights, we still have 84,321 kids. So it's a very complicated formula that gets you equalize numbers.
No, I got it. That was good.
And it's not bodies coming in the door.
Yeah.
Ready for the question on announced tuition?
Yes.
All right, all those in favor of setting fiscal year 15-16 announced tuition at $12,851. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you very much. Wow. While I have this is the new thing before I circulate it for signatures. The wording in Article 6, the fund balance article, is a little bit different than we've had in the past.
What is the change only the assigned remaining balances revenue for future budget?
Well, I haven't seen the reference to school district number 15. Is that correct?
That doesn't sound, hold on a minute. We'll continue with your work. We'll be back to you.
Okay. All right, I guess we'll keep,
Good question about Article 7.
sure.
What does it mean?
That's a good
Well,
question.
remember, these are new articles.
Yeah, I know, that's
Based
why-
on the change to Australian
Yeah,
ballot.
no, but, I mean, are we asking the voters to decide whether to elect school board directors? I mean, aren't they on the ballot? You know,
No, yeah, that is.
people are nominated?
Yeah, so that's the ballot question. That they
I mean,
vote.
can they vote, no, they're not gonna elect them?
Or,
I don't have it in front of me.
I mean, that, this looks like a yes or no question, isn't it?
But these
Hold on a minute.
these Articles 1 through 4 is what happens at the meeting before the voting. Article 5, 6, and 7 get voted on by Australian ballot.
Sure.
Well,
What if the voters vote no on Article 7?
Yeah, that's,
But
I-
Article 7 will have names on it instead of just saying that, so it will say to elect school board director for a 3-year term, here are the names of the people that you can vote for, is that?
Does anyone
Correct.
have a
When you
copy
go
of
into the
this?
ballot box, you're not gonna see a box next to the following article to elect one, blah, 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 blah.
Okay, that's what I was
This
wondering.
plays out as there will be 3 boxes for you to check for a school director, or excuse me, 1 for a school director for 3 years.
And then there'll be choices of the names, or?
Right.
Probably
If in
one
fact-
and a line for a write-in.
If in fact someone has submitted a petition by the date appropriate, otherwise there'll just be 3 blanks and you put in the name.
Okay.
That's the same thing that it said last year. However, I do note that in the warning last year, we had the CVU directors. There's no Hinesburg person up? All right, thank you. And that's maybe where the 15 comes from. I see that 15 under the CVU.
so we're gonna take the
Delete the number
15 out.
15, that usually gets attached to the CVU board.
Can I send it to you again?
yeah. You have 30 seconds. Windows will shut down in 1 minute. No, I'm just kidding, and we're never gonna get it.
Gone.
It's gonna
Yeah.
take me a little bit longer to do this one, but,
Here.
and
It's also.
It actually was
Oh,
15
do that.
seconds.
do you need me?
So
Or
I think
can
this is the last time we did it, and it just,
Absolutely.
it looks a little different. Authorized to allocate it
colleagues.
without effect on the district tax levy. I don't think it's harmful, but it's worded just a little bit different.
We never get it right.
Was
My favorite place to get signatures is in the town.
Okay,
The transfer station.
all right, but then
From Paul?
the 15 was,
Yeah. Yep.
the 15 wasn't, I don't.
Yeah, that's a leftover from,
All right.
CVU is Union School number 15.
Okay,
Thanks, Jeff.
yeah, no problem.
All right, then, while that is being processed, then we will keep going. We are now at 6.0 on the consent agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda, which is comprised of the things listed in the,
So moved.
thank you. Kathy, do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Bill. Those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
All right.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Discussion matters. So, 7.1, annual meeting and budget vote preparation. Comments, thoughts, questions? Again, this is the meeting that we've just set for 6 o'clock on the Monday night before town meeting day.
Yeah, it's basically
What?
the minutes from.
Before we vote, yeah.
Yeah. Town meeting is at 7.
Right, okay. Just
And
so
we
you-
are immediately preceding it at 6 in
So,
the same room.
the comments I would have, since I think there were a few bumps in the road last year, the guys were setting up for the meeting during our meeting, and I couldn't hear half of what was being said, so if we could make sure that that is
We took care of that.
taken care of
They
this
should
year.
all set up.
So what's the date of the meeting?
March 2nd. March 2nd.
The date of the, of our annual meeting,
Monday, March 2nd.
Monday, March 2.
Is there some, I remember some discussion about something, some timing having to flip-flop year to year.
That would be nice.
It wasn't
What
it
was-
CVU versus us?
No.
Or town versus us?
Town versus school.
In Shelburne, for example, the school board and the select board alternate who goes first each year.
It would take a multi-year discussion, because part of what we vote on is the time that we meet the next year. And because we haven't engaged the select board in this conversation, we're like a year behind in trying to do that. But I think it's definitely a worthy goal if we want people to really discuss schools.
But my question is in Shelburne, are they both, we have, I think, a unique situation, maybe I think unique where the school is Australian ballot and then the town is still town meeting format for business. So I think that might be, the select board might feel like, well, yours is more of an informational meeting where theirs is town
Oh.
business.
Yeah.
So I think that
They
might,
don't vote from the floor in Shelburne.
Correct.
Yeah.
Both
Yeah,
Shelburne and
so-
Williston
that's a good point.
so I think
vote
that's
all-
why,
All money articles.
until it all goes,
So then we just need to move the town votes to Australian ballot.
take that on, Colleen. Take that on.
I've got other things on my agenda.
I would like to, if we could, maybe, I know that the school, the select board is reticent to move their starting time back, but that'd be helpful to us, so we should, one of us should try to engage the select board around that and make that happen at the
Be my guest.
What time
Okay.
is their meeting set to start?
7.
Well, I think a town meeting has often been at 7:30. And a couple years ago, because it went really late, for example, in 2013, it was at 7:30. Because it went really late that year, there was a motion and a request to move town meeting start earlier to 7 PM, so they did that. And then subsequent to that decision, we got moved to Australian ballot, and then the only place for us to fit was from 6 to 7. So my principal recollection of our meeting last year is that it was rushed, and people, although we may have gotten through our presentation, people wanted to ask questions, and they were cut short.
Right.
Because town meeting was set to commence. So it would be incredibly helpful, given that we can't start earlier than 6 because the CVU meeting precedes us, and I don't know if people could physically make it to a meeting before 6 PM. My preference would be for town meeting to start at 7:30 to at least give us a little bit extra time to allow our community to ask us questions.
Okay, I'll volunteer to take that on at town meeting.
If I just jogging my memory a little bit, I think we did get some feedback last year about why we were including the CVU information in our presentation, since at 5:30 they have the opportunity, which might be different from what happens at Williston and Shelburne, because it's
Yeah.
not all in the same building. So I remember specifically, several people came up and talked to
I
us
think
about that.
that's a good point. I think it
Yeah.
would be helpful to have Leah or Ray? Ray? Available at our meeting in case there's any questions. And we as a school board can make a statement that, you know, there's a person from the CVU board that can answer any questions you have related to CVU. There was a presentation earlier, I'm sure we can get you those materials, but we're not really gonna address CVU.
Yeah,
Or
I
give them
think that's a
more
good
time.
idea.
Yeah.
So, I was snowed in Indianapolis last year, so I missed the meeting, so don't remember, but that point about, I did have someone talk to me about CVU, being presented in the same format with
Right,
us.
in the same
And-
PowerPoint.
And can we do a better job of differentiating that?
I
Like,
don't think we should do it this year that way.
Yeah.
We should just
I
not.
think we should just
make
omit it.
Omit it
Right.
and make
Yep.
it a Heinsberg Community School meeting.
Because right before
Yeah,
that
I
is the
agree.
CVU
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
presentation.
If you wanna know about CVU, you can go to that meeting.
Yeah.
okay,
And
so
and
I
I
just wanna
think,
make sure.
I
it's
think in our
understood in the
presentation,
conversation.
to be complete with respect to the tax picture, we have to include CVU. So we'll mention it,
Yeah,
and we'll invite the public to ask questions of Leah or Ray or whoever is there from CVU, but we won't, as Bill said, we won't give them floor time to re-present the material that had been presented an hour before.
I mean, really, our responsibility is to present our numbers,
we don't
our
know
tax
their
rate,
budget,
right? Our piece.
It is, but the other.
Answer questions
the
about
other
our piece.
sister schools, since it's not in the same, it's traditionally that has always been part of their presentation is to do CVU because people don't really always have the time to come to CVU
Right.
and get to their meeting too. So I think that's, this being the first time that, last year that Hinesburg did it that way.
So you've had experience with Shelburne. I mean, do you have recommendations for us about how to approach it?
Well, in Shelburne, and Bob, you can certainly chime in, but in Shelburne, it was a necessity for the town to have that opportunity to see the CVU budget, and there was always somebody there, because we couldn't get to,
Yeah.
over to CVU to hear that, and then get to the Shelburne meeting also.
Just
I mean,
being
it
different
just-
locations.
Right,
But
but
this
this
is
is in the
the
same
same
location. So I think, I liked Keith's suggestion, but I would I would look to Bob for that too. I don't know if you have a preference or not.
The tradition in Williston and Shelburne is to represent schools in total in any presentations they make. So at the January hearings, they're done as a team, and on town meeting day, they're done as a team. And it would appear, so for example, in Shelburne, the Shelburne board gets up and presents the first 15 slides. CVU has 5 slides, and then the summary at the end includes the tax impacts for homeowners from both schools individually and then totaled. And it seems to make sense in those communities. You've made some good points about it's a little different here, given the setting. I'd do something different than you did last year, take notes, and you may want to have this conversation again next year about what input you got as a result of whatever it is you did. And Keith, I'll look to you to help me with where you want me to put and how much you want me to put in of CVU. Clearly, you want to end with the tax impacts from both, but how much more you want to do.
Let me look through the slides from last year.
Yes.
And get back to you on that.
Please.
Great.
If the town meeting is moved to 7:30, are you less worried about including that presentation?
Well, it's not
If-
happening this year anyway, so.
Oh, because it's already set. Right.
Yeah, I think
That's for future.
even if town meeting were moved to 7:30 and we omitted the CVU material that we included last year, I still think that we would need the full time to allow our community to engage in discussion about our budget.
If I would say that in the past, I mean, going back, well, I mean, there's obviously pre-Australian ballot, but going back a few years, we never presented on the CVU budget. We presented on the budget that we were asking people to approve. I mean,
Because the CVU budget had been passed by that point.
Yeah.
So we didn't really need to
but,
address.
well,
any
we didn't, but,
questions.
you know, we gave that as, these are the amounts.
Colleen needs to sign us.
And it has an effect on your tax rate, but, yeah, it had been approved, but.
Yeah,
But also, it wasn't our expertise.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're contemplating doing now, is just talking about it to the extent it affects your tax rate, but talking about the level of detail about hiring new teachers or lowering number of administrators at CVU. We did that last year. We're not gonna do that this year because that's not, that's not what we know. We have limited amount of time to present what we know, and for those people that wanna hear about CVU, they can come an hour earlier and hear it.
And I was sitting in the audience last year, and I remember just hearing the overall groaning going on as to, well, why is he doing this again? So I heard a lot of that.
Okay.
So I
I
think,
think there was written feedback to that effect as well.
but there was a lot of
Right?
groaning too.
Yeah, I know, I was there.
Body language.
Yes, it was very clear the audience didn't want to hear it twice, because a lot of people had come to the first meeting.
So, can I just ask, is what I'm hearing that you're going to switch the focus so that it starts with HCS and then builds in the CVU piece and summarizes, as opposed to last year where you started with CVU? Okay.
No, we didn't start with CVU. We started with HCS, then allowed
Yeah.
Ray to talk about
Oh,
CVU for a
okay.
little bit, and then brought it all together. We're gonna cut out that middle portion.
Wait, all I remember is just the focus on CVU was. having sat through it, the previous one, you know, I was at that other meeting too. So, thank you.
All right.
We're good.
Well, I think we're good. The other thing that I'd like to mention tonight, but clearly we can talk a little bit more, well, I'd like feedback tonight, and if so, we can talk more in February about
I was gonna ask that.
redoing one of these things again.
I would love it if whoever did it last year did such a great job with it.
I think it was
Let me get my whitewashing.
Keith for the most part, and I helped a little bit. And Allegra and Jeff. And that, the woman.
I'd like to make a suggestion about the meeting though, too.
Yeah.
I think sometimes it seems like the administrators presented, which was good. Frankly, I think that should be this year briefer and more top line. We don't have to sit up and tell them, oh, we're a great school, this is what we do, it's great, we did this and that. Just, here's our enrollment, you know, this is maybe a tiny bit about how we're doing academically, and this is what we want to, if you guys want to do, what we're going to add and why. And then Keith can do his, he always does a very good job with his presentation about the budget. But I think it would be great, Kathy's our facilities person, so any questions related around facilities, let's defer to Kathy. Maybe Kathy, in your own brain, can get a little crib sheet together if they ask you, like, what are your what are your, your capital plans? If there's, since Colleen or I, if they ask about, if anything comes about the teacher's contract or negotiations that happen there, you or I can address that, or maybe Colleen, if I want to take that, you could take on the CSSU portion of, if there's any questions around that. And if there's anything on the audit, Stacy could speak to that. But if we all have a little crib sheet of what we would say or expected questions, I think it's better if, I think one thing that the select board does pretty well is they defer to certain members' area of expertise to speak, so it's not kind of like, keep, you know what I mean? I think that's not a criticism of you. Please don't think it that way.
I think we've done that in the past when we had our meeting in the gym.
Okay.
I think last year, because there was so little opportunity for
Right.
questions, we didn't really get a chance to
Understood.
divvy that around.
Well, I just think
yes,
that's
I agree we should do that.
So basically take the budget line items and divvy them up.
Or just more so like if there's a question about facilities, Kathy's a facility, she could say, I'm on the facilities committee, this is it. And if anything comes with the audit, you could talk about, or whatever someone feels
Yeah,
like they're.
I just recall there being a lot of sort of nitpick line item questions. Well, why is this up so much, and why is this down so much, and that kind of thing. And I know in the past, as a budget buddy, I kind of said, it'd be great if we could have some kind of footnote referencing for the items that are big as to why they've changed. And I don't know if we're probably not able to add extra space in the book, and I think that might have been the reason why, but I think if we had more explanation as to why
Right, I
these
was just thinking
variance
about
items
that.
are changing.
Right, for example, the whole special ed piece moving to CSSU.
Right.
Like that, you're right, we should have that down to just a couple bullets, so you don't want it
That should be.
10 bullets long.
But if we explain the major
Right.
things that are changing, then
Yeah.
that doesn't have to come up as a question.
Right,
Just food for
Well,
thought.
That's a
yes,
good idea.
and I think we do that in preparation every year. We think about what we think people might want to know, but there are always questions that you don't expect and
I guess.
don't know what they're going to come from. And I think through all of our budget discussions, we probably have a good handle to answer half to 2/3 of them.
Right.
But then there's a third that are completely out of left field that we need to turn to our administrators for and say, help.
Right. I guess what I'm trying to say is, for the questions that we know they're gonna ask, if we can somehow present that to them, either in the book with a footnote reference or through the slides or whatever.
Can you give some thought to what you think those questions are going to be
Mhm.
before our February 17th meeting?
Mhm.
So that we can then use some time to start preparing to
Yeah.
include that information in slides.
Sure.
Okay.
And the other piece that we've had questions about is when we present in a PowerPoint one set of numbers and the numbers are different in the book. So we just want to make sure that whatever we're presenting, that we can reference where it is.
The book goes to the printers in about a week, so if you're talking the town report, that's behind you. You have every opportunity to kind of repackage, change whatever you're putting in.
Yeah,
Marcy
and I got
Castle's
your
newsletter.
email with the letter I need to write, which is why, I mean, I didn't want to tackle it until after tonight's meeting. But I will respond
Good.
to that. In light of timing for when everything needs to happen, I guess I would like more than feedback tonight. I'd like to know whether we should do this, and then I'd love for someone to volunteer to help me with it, the way Stacy did last year.
I can help you again.
Okay, that'd be great.
Mm-hmm.
Is there
That would be
any,
awesome.
is there any vehement objection to doing publicity like this?
I think we
That's
need to
great.
do it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then I think we can dedicate some more time at our next regular meeting on the 17th of February to fine tuning the presentation materials for the the town meeting night
Maybe
meeting.
we can come up with a bunch of FAQs, you know, what do we think that people are going to ask, and be ready for it.
Is there, I guess what you're saying is there's a week before this is gonna get set and then we won't have an opportunity to change it. Is it dumb, I guess, to provide it right in the book for the big items that we know people are gonna go, well, why is that?
We do that in the book.
We do.
You do that in the book already, but you don't, to the point made, you don't necessarily cover them all, and invariably, the question someone has is one you didn't cover.
So is it in Keith's letter?
No, it's in the exhibits to the, right? Don't we still include? I don't have the report, but whatever was in there last year.
This?
No, the annual report.
The line by line.
Yeah, and there's a line by line, and then there's 3 or 4 exhibits that say these are the key areas, this is enrollment. Am I making this up? Okay.
So that's where you would, for example, explain the cost shift in special ed, or no? I think that's what Stacy was trying to get to. She wants bullets that explain some of the.
Not what the line item represents, but why was there a 4% increase in instructional
And
spending?
you're thinking of right to the function
Right.
object.
Because that's where all the questions come from. They go, why was there a, why was there a, blah, blah, blah," and they just look at all these percentages and they get all excited about anything that's over 2% and they ask about it. So I'm just sitting here going, well, if we have this weird 98% number that's flagging, can we put a little A next to it and a little A down here or something that says, this is up there 98% because there was a change in blah, whatever it is. So that there's just an explanation so that they see it and go, oh, and that won't even be a question
You
because
see
it's
it
it's
on
right
the
there.
function object table.
Right,
Yeah.
or somewhere, but yeah.
And maybe there are like 3.
We could just pick the ones that are big and weird.
Special ed, change in accounting.
Right.
Something.
Right. That's what I'm suggesting. If it's a bad idea, if it's a bad idea,
I'm not sure what it is that you have in your mind, but I can honestly tell you what you have in your mind is not in that book. And it
that's what I
won't be in
thought.
that book because the wheels are in motion to update everything that's in the book last year, this year. So it's,
We should have started working on it.
if
I
you
brought
wanna
it up- I brought
change
it up
what's
last
in your annual report,
Next year.
yes, you gotta start earlier.
I brought it up last year.
The 17th.
The
whatever.
30,000 foot level changes I can mention in the letter that I'm gonna write,
right.
and it's gonna be in this.
And it's gonna be in your PowerPoint.
And it's gonna be in our PowerPoint for that evening,
And to
Which-
Colleen's point,
which
we
we
can prep, we
present-
can obviously prep a Q&A.
which we present before we take questions.
Right.
So hopefully,
They'll
people
listen.
can connect the dots and say, oh my gosh, the SU special education budget is going up by 98%. Why is that? Oh, because they just told us
Right.
why.
But someone will still ask the question, but that's fine.
Might be nice to get an educator to scan whatever document we put out, because they're so, you know, they're skilled at presentation of materials and simplifying, so.
Paul would be glad to do
That was almost quicker than
You need somebody to look at the PowerPoint? Is that what you're saying?
No, I just, you know, any communication materials, just make sure we've got multiple education eyes on it.
All right. Any last thoughts?
Thank you so much for whoever's taking on that work. I know it's an awful lot for 2 pages.
So Keith, how much involvement do you want, Allegra and I, do you want us to be the ones to contact Marcy? Are you gonna contact Marcy? Do we wanna schedule time before we leave?
Let me think about that
Okay.
and be in touch with you.
Great.
Yep.
And refresh my memory as to how it happened last year and probably follow that.
Okay.
It's a good strategy.
I was mindful of this, but I was really just focused on this.
Got it.
And last year she had vacation too, so that kind of threw a wrinkle in things, remember?
Yeah, she was gone right around now, so yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hey, you know what? We'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just want to make sure that we express a huge thank you to administrative team, Sandy, for helping us get to this point. I know it starts a year ago that you've been doing this, and we've got one number, but a whole lot of work went into that. So thank you so much to you and your team for doing it.
I would
And also to our
thank
budget
you as
buddies
well,
for
And to our budget buddies.
also thank our budget
Thank
buddies
great
for.
input from all of you.
I'm still volunteering to help with that, the communication
Oh,
piece.
excellent,
Ooh.
excellent. That would be great. All right, so.
Go home and have a glass of wine.
Little more
Bourbon.
help is awesome.
Are you kidding
You
me?
need bourbon.
You can come over if you want. All right, so confirming next meeting dates, our meeting, February 17th, 7 o'clock at CVU, SU at 7. SU meeting, same day at 5 at CVU. Board chairs is there on February 3rd, and 9.0 is adjournment, so you know what that means.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn, please.
I would love to have that, Colleen. Do I have a second for that motion?
Second.
Thank you very much, Stacy. All those in favor? Say aye.
Bill, do you have one of these?
We are adjourned. Thank you.
I left it.